guest this week is the amazing C.L. Taylor, better known as Callie. How are you doing this week, Callie?
I'm all right, Luca. Apologies to the viewers for my webcam. Me and Luke were just absolutely crying with laughter beforehand as I tried to get it to work and not look like a ghost.
Yeah, it was 20 minutes of just like, how white is my face? It's fine, we can see it, it's fine. It's going to be...
Yeah.
But this is the thing, it's like, it's 3 years on now. You'd think we'd all have like a camera crew in our heart by now, because the amount of Zoom stuff that we do as writers days compared to pre-pandemic, it's, that should be a business expense that we should all be going for, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. I should not be fighting with my webcam on a daily basis, but hey ho.
Thanks, I should say, just for those viewing, thanks very much for the feedback on the first episode of this new series. Although Mason Cross did make me feel terrible, because he did come up with a great idea that I should have had like a subtitle to this, like Two Crime Writers and Microphone, The Resurgence or The Resurrection. And I'm really annoyed that I didn't think of that before. But the feedback was great, and I'm going to do this as regularly as possible, hence why we've got Callie here today. So, Callie, I have thankfully got a Wikipedia article for you as well. Now, Mark's was a little more in depth, so there was probably more errors in his than yours. And I mean, there is going to come a time when I have someone who doesn't have a Wikipedia article, and I'll have to actually, put some effort into the beginning of an interview.
Do some research.
I haven't got a Wikipedia article.
Oh.
And
you need to get someone to sort that.
Weirdly, I am named on someone else's Wikipedia article. And
that should be good enough.
At some point, I'll have that person on here, and we can talk about that for a good 40 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But so it's Callie Taylor. That's what your name is on Wikipedia. That's not your name. You weren't christened Callie, were you, though?
Yeah, don't tell people my real name.
Yes.
just for security reasons. Also, people might take the piss out of me, like Ed James. So
I'm pretty certain I did that when I heard your real name.
Yeah, I got a few text messages. I got a text message from Claire McIntosh that went, "Really? Your parents?" ! And I was just like, all right.
Talking to someone who grew up in Liverpool called Luca Veste. I mean, no one. Yeah. It's like I did an event last night, and there was someone came up to get their book signed, and they said, "My name is Joanna, but it's like Joanna with an I." And I was like, "What? That's so." She started, but it was literally, instead of like JOANNA, it was IONNA. But that took like 3 minutes for me to work out what the name was, because I'm going, no, that's Yona, because like IONA is Yona. She's like, no, it's Ioana, and I was like, but then like I could see her getting a bit like, that's just my name, and I said, listen, have you seen my name? So what is interesting though is on Wikipedia, usually like it is very much like everyone has to have the exact same thing, but you don't have a birth date on there. That's another thing. You don't have a picture on there. You are literally the first person I've come across on Wikipedia who could still be a spy and no one would know.
That's the aim.
The Wikipedia starts. Callie Taylor is best known for her alias C.L. Taylor. Does the L stand for anything? Is that your middle?
That is my actual middle name, Louise. Yeah, I'll give you that much. Yeah.
We'll go into why there is two different things, because Callie, as you have written under Callie Taylor before, that was the original thing. So a Sunday Times best-selling crime author, and it says, so biography, Taylor was born in Worcester.
That's true.
That's true. Now, Worcester, I didn't look this up because I thought it'd be funnier if I tried to guess where it was.
Oh, okay.
Now, I think this is where I think it might be, and I'm notoriously terrible at geography. Is that between Birmingham and Bristol? So it's on this side of the country.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
Very much for coming on the show. I'll see you all later. God. So I know you now live in Bristol, but so you're born. Did you grow up in Worcester then?
No. Oh. So my dad was in the army.
Ah,
So I was born in Bristol, not Bristol, Worcester, and I've got family. My mum's family live in the area. My mum's family were sort of farming, into farming and stuff, and livestock and haulage and all that kind of stuff. So they lived in like little villages near to Worcester, and my dad my dad must have been posted somewhere near Worcester for my mum to actually have given birth there, or maybe I don't know, maybe she went home to have me. I don't know. I've not actually asked, but yeah, I didn't live in Worcester at all, apart from when I had a gap year from after school when I got no offers for universities or polytechnics. There's a whole other story behind why. And I was forced to have a gap year. And my mum said I really want to go traveling, like all my friends. And my mum said I could only have a gap year if I did a secretarial admin course. And I ended up doing that in Worcester. And then I had all kinds of interesting adventures, living in various different places. But yeah, literally born in Worcester and only spent 1 year of my life there when I was about 18. So
so so your dad was in the army. Does that mean that you moved around quite a lot when you were younger then?
yeah. I mean, probably wasn't as bad as a lot of army kids, but I can't remember obviously the ones from when I was super little, but I knew that we lived in like Bovington and Weymouth, and we lived in Detmold in Germany. We lived in Catterick in North Yorkshire. Then we lived in Hona in Germany. Then we lived in Chester. Um, so all over the place, really. But it was just normal. It is your normal as a kid that you just, you leave the school, you start a new school, you meet some new kids, you say goodbye to some friends.
Yeah.
But it's a weird one in that I kind of consider myself a bit rootless. Like I'm really envious of you being from Liverpool. And like you sound like you're from Liverpool and you know Liverpool and you got friends and family in Liverpool. And the same with like, I know Mason up in Glasgow or whatever. There's that sense of being rooted in this is your hometown, this is where you're from. I don't really feel like I'm from anywhere. Just because I was sort of born somewhere and then moved around and moved around and moved around. So you don't have roots really. And my mum keeps saying, "Oh yeah, your roots are Worcestershire because that's where your granny lived and that's where your cousins lived and stuff." But it's not really if you don't grow up there. Um, so that's why it's important for me now for my son to have roots in Bristol. He was born in Bristol. He's done his whole primary school in Bristol. He's going to do secondary school in Bristol. And I want him to have what I didn't have as a kid, that sense of that place of going home.
So you must have, I mean, like you say, I've got roots in Liverpool and stuff like that, but I did actually go to a number of different primary schools and
Oh, okay.
high schools, but it's all in the same area, so it's different. But you were literally moving around the country. Did you have brothers and sisters as well at the same time?
Yeah. My sister is 3.5 years younger than me. So for a long time, it was just the two of us, sort of doing this traveling around and whatnot. And my brother is 9.5 years younger than me.
Wow.
So yeah, but it when my brother was born, I think my mum realized that she had her hands full, because that's when she asked me if I wanted to go to boarding school because I was a massive, yeah, you didn't know I went to boarding school.
Oh,
Yeah, I was a massive Enid Blyton fan, read all the Mallory Towers and the naughtiest girl in the school and all that.
I loved Mallory Towers, and that was mainly because I didn't understand what a boarding school was.
Yeah, well, I didn't either. And then I suddenly found myself in one and it was nothing like the books. So thanks, Enid Blyton.
So you were about 9.5 when you went to boarding school.
No, I was 10, 10 nearly 11. So, she let me experience a year of my brother's life before she shipped me off.
How long were you in boarding school for?
10 till, well, they put me in a year early. I was quite bright as a primary school kid, got progressively thicker through my life, as you'll know, having been on quiz teams with me.
But to be fair, it's always me or you at the bottom.
Exactly. So they put me in I was really young for my year. They put me in the year above. So I did my A levels at 17. So yeah, so it was like 10 to 17 sort of thing. So and then I left.
I mean, that's interesting because you talk about like it being normal to have no kind of roots when you're a kid. You just felt it was a normal thing to be moving around.
Yeah.
But there must have been that sense of feeling like you don't really belong anywhere.
Yeah.
I wonder if that is something that you recognize at the time, or something that you can look back on later in life and think didn't really feel like like I was part of anything.
Yeah, it didn't really hit me until I went to university because obviously I was at boarding school and all my friends at boarding school were in the same situation where you'd be at school during the term time and then in the holidays you'd return home. So you wouldn't see your friends from school typically in the holidays. I mean, I lived in Germany and some of the girls lived in Uganda or Nigeria or just London or whatever. And so that was that kind of normal. And then it was only when I went to university that I met all these mates from London and Leeds and Manchester. And at the end of term, they'd all go home and they'd I don't know, send me letters or whatever saying they'd met up with their mates and they'd gone to the pub and they'd whatever. And I think I'd just gone to Chester because my dad had moved there. I don't know. Was it while I was at university or I don't know, doing something else, and they moved house again. And I just literally went back to this town that I didn't know. And then I was like, oh my God, all my mates are hanging out with, people they went to primary school with. And that is a weird kind of displacement feeling. So I kind of made university my home then. And I'd often spend the holidays at university with some other people who were staying up to work or whatever. And so I tend to, God, it's quite deep, isn't it? I tend to make my home, I think, wherever I'm living. So, when I lived in Brighton for 13 years, that was my home. And now it's Bristol. So it's just wherever I live, I think.
So did your brother and sister? I'm assuming they didn't go to boarding school themselves, or am I wrong in that?
They actually, my mum will hate me for saying this. She got rid of us younger and younger. so, so she got rid of me at nearly 11, and then I think she got rid of my sister. Got rid of. She sent my sister to prep school, which is like a primary school thing, at 9, and I think she sent my brother away at 8. So they spent a lot of their childhood, I guess, at boarding school and stuff. But yeah, it was a weird one, with there being 9.5 years difference between me and my brother. Because by the time he went to boarding school, I was leaving home. So that I've covered that in a book because I think that's quite an interesting sort of situation, age gaps between siblings and stuff. We're much better mates with him now as adults than we were when we were little.
I can imagine. I mean, I'm one of 9 kids, uh,
Yeah.
so I'm the second old. I've got an older sister who's 3 years older than me, but I became de facto the oldest. I don't know how it happened. I think it's just because I was, I wanted to be the one, everyone came to at the beginning, and then as it happens more and more, you're like, please don't come to me with any of you. But my youngest brother is 14 years younger than me. Uh,
Wow.
it's like a big lot. There's a big gap between the whole lot of us, and it is difficult because you almost become like another parent to that sibling, don't you? It's like that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's like there isn't kind of that sibling relationship. It becomes more of a parent child. Like you don't, and
Yeah.
the parent. I mean, the thing is, though, is that you weren't around when he was a kid anyway.
No.
It's like
No.
That's the interesting thing. But I'm interested to know then is, do you think it had any effect? Because memory is interesting, and I will ask the question that I'm going to ask every single person who comes on this in a second. But memory is one of those things where you don't have a lot of early memories. These don't start forming until you're all, you don't remember every detail of your life before 8, 9, 10 years old.
Mm.
Because you were away at boarding school, what are your memories of your parents? Is it just those kind of small piecemeal kind of time that you had with them when you were home from boarding school?
I can remember, and I don't know if this is true for most kids or not, but I can remember really vividly my dad teaching me to ride a bike. And I can remember my dad teaching me to swim on my back. I don't know if it's because they're both slightly fearful things where, you worry you're going to fall off and hurt yourself, or you worry that you're going to drown or whatever. But I remember those. And I remember they bought a house when dad was still in the army. I think it was their first house that they, no, yeah, I sort of remember the first house that they bought. Now, my mum claims this is a false memory, but I remember me and my sister being in the same bedroom, and she was in a cot, so she must have been about one, and I must have been about 4.5 in the bed. And I swear I remember my sister taking off her nappy and pooing in the cot, and me shouting, "Mom, Beck's done a poo in her bed." My mum claims that that never happened, but I've got such a powerful memory of it that I feel like it must have, because otherwise, where did that come from? And I can remember the second house that they bought, and like the musty smell and kind of sort of exploring, and memories of my grand's farm and stuff like that. It's really weird because I've actually got really strong, really quite strong childhood memories. Just like down to like little things, like I must have been about 7 or 8. We lived in this sort of army road, and around the back of our house was, there's like a bunch of woods, and there was a fence, and somebody had made the fence, a hole in the fence. And I went in and I made a den, and I didn't want anybody to break the den. So I used wool to like try and close up the gap in the fence so that nobody else could get in. And then next day I went back and somebody just cut through it. So it's just like little details. But my sister and my brother both have terrible, they have nothing. When they think back to childhood, they have no memories. And I've got loads. And I don't know why that is. I think that's
I do
quite
think
odd.
that's probably the norm, is that you don't really remember a lot. I mean, I've got like, you have like tiny little things that like I remember,
Yeah.
like, but I don't have very strong memory. I wouldn't remember something like that probably, where it's like, the whole,
Mm.
I probably wouldn't remember that. I remember certain things, and a lot of it is tied into traumatic events. It's like,
Yeah.
I remember like, certain things that happen. It's like they are vivid. But then there's like whole moments where my dad will say, "Do you remember when this happened?" And I'm like, "No, I've got no idea what that you're talking about." So I mean, that kind of does answer the question I was going to ask about what do you think your earliest memory is? I imagine that would be the sister pooing in the cot, which is a great first memory to have.
Yeah.
Keep it with that one. So okay, so that's like we've gone over the first 5 words of your biography and discovered that that's not the not,
Doesn't take much to get me talking.
what what kind of child were you though? Was you a studious child? Were you interested in what was you interested in as a kid? Was you reading? Was you writing stories, or what kind of kid were you?
Uh, what kind of kid was I? I was a introvert kid, same as I'm an introvert adult. Just loved being by myself, loved reading, loved doing crafts, um, loved writing books. I was one of those kids, like lots of authors, who wrote little books and did the illustrations and all that kind of stuff. But there was another side to me as well, like a little bit of a performy side. So me and my friends would like make up plays and put them on in front of my parents. And I got quite into puppets at one point. And I don't know if they had them in the UK, but they had like these puppets that were like furry, and they had like an octopus. And so you do this with your hands, and it looked like the octopus is, because the look on your face, you're too young, but also maybe it's just me.
Maybe they were in the UK. They just didn't make it to Liverpool.
I also quite liked those creepy clowns, like Mark Billingham's got with the jaw that goes up and down. and I had to do. We had a school talent show, and I wanted to be a ventriloquist. I can't say that word. But I had no jokes, so my dad had to write my routine for me. It was probably terrible. Something about drinking milk like a cow and laying eggs. I can't remember, but I remember that much. But it would have been awful. But yeah, so I was a mixture of loving my own time and just spending time on my own and wanting to perform, which is probably quite unusual. I don't know. Although, like you spoke to Mark, and he's a massive performer, so.
I mean, Mark is the consummate show off. He's literally me, but a bit older. As I like to always remind him. But I think there is that kind of the way I'm starting to look at it now is it's more about the creativity in people like who do that kind of way. It does lend itself well to also wanting to be performers. So I think it's not about being introverted or extroverted, because I think if you talk to some of the most famous kind of actors or comedians or whatever, they are quite introverted off stage, but on stage it's a little bit different. And I wonder if that's probably what was going on with yourself as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's that thing, isn't it, about inhabiting a different character. And whether you're writing or you're acting or you're trying to do a comedy routine or whatever it is, it's about becoming somebody different. Like when I write my books, I try and become that character. And if I've got a really angsty main character or a really emotional scene, I've got to live through those feelings, which makes it really exhausting. Much more exhausting, I think, than if you're in a play, and then although actually no, that is tiring, but it's tiring in a different way. It's tiring in a more physical way, I think, if you're in a play and you're showing lots of emotion, powerful emotion. I wonder, I saw the Jodie Comer Prima Facie recently, and I thought, how can she do that night after night? And Media as well, with what was that brilliant actress that died, Helen? She was in Peaky Blinders.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I remember. But both of those really, really powerful stage performances with so much emotion. I'm like, how do they do that? How do they do that night after night so convincing? But then again, I guess we do day after day with books, like constantly having to throw yourself into the emotion of it and live it as though it's real. So
when you were in, so we went to boarding school for like the formative years I think they are as your teenage years. They're what kind of informs what comes next. Was you encouraged in this kind of love for creativity, or was it a bit more, concentrate on maths and science, young girl?
I was, ask any of my classmates, I was a terrible show off in when I was show off, I was just really over enthusiastic in English class. So if it was like, anybody want to read their story out? Me, I was always putting my hands up. I wouldn't do it in any other lesson. I wasn't interested in, being the one, but I really wanted to share what I'd written, particularly if I thought it was good. But and my teacher was really Mrs. Jeans, she was then, she's since got remarried. She was so good, she was so encouraging. And when I had my first two books published, I actually found her because she knew the head teacher who was in the village next to my mum or something. So I managed to track her down quite easily. And I sent her a letter and sent her the two books I'd had published at the time. And she sent me the loveliest handwritten letter back. I mean, I've got no idea if she actually remembered me or not. I just want to say thank you, because I think with most of us, there's someone who encouraged us or someone made us feel like we had some talent. And so she was that for me. And I loved art and I loved drama. I hated piano lessons. And I think I was encouraged to go more down the science route. But I sort of hit GCSEs and realised my limit. I was like, I can't go much further with this. So yeah, I did English A level, so that made me happy.
So, did you have designs on? Did you know what you wanted to be at that time? Did you know you wanted to be a writer at that point, or was it just you were just doing things that you enjoyed?
I'd always wanted to be a writer since I was 8. You know, when I wrote those little books, and I've said this before, I sent them to Penguin, Ladybird Publishers, got my first rejection. I still got one of the letters. I kept trying until I was 11, apparently, which is weird because I was at boarding school then, and I don't remember sending one when I was at boarding school, but I must have done. And I just kind of assumed that, you know, because I'd been rejected several times between the ages of 8 and 11, that I was never going to make it as an author.
Thought about this on one of the podcast episodes we've done a few years ago. Possibly,
yeah,
we haven't.
yeah.
I apologise because it is a hilarious story, but we've definitely thought about this at some point.
Yeah.
So you decided that because you've been rejected between the age of 8 and 11, it's never gonna happen.
Because, you know, tons and tons of kids are published at the ages of 8, 9, 10.
Oh my God. But how did you know? I mean, like, I probably asked you this question. How did you know to send it off to a publisher though? Did you do that? Who told you should send that to Ladybird or Penguin? You know,
I don't know. I've got a feeling that I'm sure they had the addresses.
yeah, in the book.
Yeah, I think they've got addresses in the back of the book. So I think I just wrote to them with, yeah. I got the sweetest letter back, which was oh yeah, obviously a no, but it was like, you know, next time please get a parent to type up the pages and put your illustrations on separate sheets. You don't have to bind it all together like a book. You know, it was just, I obviously was completely clueless, but I hope I made some kind of disgruntled editor smile when they opened up this little wool bound package.
Have you still got those
Yeah.
books? You still got them?
My mum kept them. She kept them in the attic all these years and all these house moves, and she gave them to me.
If at all possible, if you've got a photograph of one of them, I'd love to be able to put it up on the video.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, we'll do.
So you've done that. So you've done that. You've got to. I mean, you mentioned earlier about you took a gap year. So what happened? Why did you not get any offers from universities or polytechnics? What happened at the ages?
Well, so I applied to do English and drama, and I applied to unis and polys. And when everybody else was getting all their offers back and stuff, I was just getting rejection after rejection after rejection. And I was like, this is really unusual, particularly like even with the polys, because, you know, everyone at least got an offer from a poly. You know, I can't remember what I was predicted, but I was predicted like B's and C's or something. So it wasn't like terrible A-level results. Anyway, nothing. And I didn't know why until one of the girls in my year broke into what they called the careers office, which was a part of the library, our school library. She broke in and she found everybody's UCAS application forms because they photocopied them. Anyway, she found mine and she showed me mine. And I had all of these sort of teacher report things where they've sort of written. And basically they had written that I was not suitable for a drama course because I didn't speak in class. Because I went through this is a whole other thing. I went through a massive shy phase in the sixth form because our girls' school mixed with the boys' school down the road, and we went to their school for lessons. And this was like a school that was like established in the reign of Henry VIII, and all of the parents were really rich and the boys were really entitled. Whereas my school, a lot of us were in the forces, so we got scholarships for being in the forces, and we were kind of more down at heel sort of thing. Anyway, as well as them giving me really bad sort of references, they'd missed off my predictions. I had no predictions on my UCAS form. So, of course, I got rejected because I had no predictions, but I couldn't say anything. The sort of loyalty in me did not want to dob in this girl by saying to a teacher, hang on, I've seen my UCAS form. So I just kept stum and then took this year out and applied again, this time via my tech college where I was doing my secretarial admin course, and I decided to do psychology instead. And it's the best decision I could have made because I had the best 3 years of my life at Newcastle.
I was going to say, I mean, because like so we did the first 5 words of your biography. The next words are, and obtained her degree in psychology from the University of Northumbria in Newcastle upon Tyne. So, how did you go from English and drama to psychology?
So I think I kind of realised that maybe I wasn't cut out for drama. I'd heard a lot from other people that there was lots of sort of crawling around and grunting and pretending to be trees and all that kind of stuff. And I'd never really enjoyed the kind of improvisation side of drama. Um, so but I had been interested in psychology. And when I was doing my A levels, we got the chance to go to some university to do a weekend course on psychology. I think it was like the university just trying to get kids in to make us interested. And they, of course, showed us all the most interesting bits about psychology, like social psychology, about the way, crowds act. And then they did a kind of like romantic psychology, like they were obviously trying to appeal to our age group. It was like, about pupils getting bigger when you see somebody that you find attractive, and and all of these different movements, and how to tell if someone's lying, all of the kind of pop psychology stuff that's really appealing. And I'd been on this like weekend course thing and thought, oh my God, this is brilliant. So when I applied again, I just took the grades that I had, looked to see who would take me, and I got an offer from Middlesex and Newcastle. And I didn't want to be near London because I thought it'd be too expensive. And I accepted Newcastle without ever visiting Newcastle. I literally saw Newcastle for the first time on my first day.
Now, I would imagine for someone like me who basically didn't leave Liverpool until he was like 28, that would have been an horrendous experience. But you've already kind of in the first like 18 years of your life, we're primed to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You to a place and you weren't overawed or put off by it. It sounds like you just went and did it. You went for it.
I think I might have been more fearful if I hadn't had that gap year in Worcester. Because literally, in Worcester, when I was in Worcester, I stayed with a friend for a little while and her family until I was kicked out for being too messy. This is also quite a theme in my life. Um, and then I lived with a family in their attic room, and that lasted until they said they needed it for their daughter, although possibly I was too messy and they're using it as an excuse. And then I found a room in a newspaper, and in a shared house. This was just like random people. And I took some of my friends from the course, and there was this really creepy landlord, and they were all really worried that I was going to get murdered. I didn't meet any of my flatmates. I just saw the room, this tiny little single room for like 33 quid a week or whatever it was, and then moved in, and then I met my flatmates, which was quite brave. Like now, I'm not sure I would have been that brave. My flatmates there's 3 blokes and 1 girl, and the oldest one was 10 years older than me. He was 28, but I had the best year of my life, and boy did I grow up like hanging around with them. They were just chaos. One of them used to go dumpster diving and come back, and we'd find like dolls' heads stapled to the living room wall. Other times they'd decide to just randomly paint the walls, or they would cover the basement in bubble wrap, because one of them worked for a baby food company. They strapped all the chairs together so you had to climb and sit right on the top like it was a throne. It was just madness. It was just madness for a year. But I grew up a lot. And so I think when I went to university, I was like, can't be can't be much madder than that. And it wasn't. It was really tame in comparison. I was a bit like, oh.
My daughter's just turned 17, and the idea of her doing anything like that now, I mean, we can't get her to do basically anything. Like she had to cook her own pizza last night because I had an event. I usually do all the cooking, and for an hour after I left the house, I was waiting for the ring doorbell to come up as an alert with the fire engine outside our house. Happen. But I mean, this must have been what, early 90s. This is around the early 90s.
Yeah, 92. I went to uni. Yeah.
This is pre-mobile phones and all that type of thing. How do you keep in touch with family? Do they, try and keep tabs on you and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. We definitely wrote letters, because I've got a bunch of letters that my mum and my brother and sister sent me when I was at uni. And we did have a phone. We had a shared house phone. And then there was the nightmare of going through the itemized list at the end of every month to say like who rung who and who, and like was that when we rang for a takeaway, or was that, yeah, no, and splitting stuff that nobody agreed. Oh, it was a bloody nightmare. But
So,
all part of fun.
so you're at university in Newcastle, and it's what, early to mid '90s. What was the vibe in the city at that time? Like, in those 3 years at university, what was it like?
It was brilliant. It was like there was like two parts of the city, I guess. There was the whole kind of big market crowd, which is the locals, going out not wearing very much clothes, even though it's like -10. And then the students all embracing, or at least my kind of group of friends, embracing grunge and going out in like para boots and crochet jumpers and, all that kind of stuff. Um, it was just very fun and very free and liberating. And yeah, I've just got all good memories. I joined the drama society, which provided a lot more fun moments as well. And for me, university was all about the people that I met and the things that I did that wasn't my degree. I also had stats. I hadn't realized that a BSc in psychology meant Bachelor of Science, and you'd have to do statistics.
Hmm.
Statistics was 9 o'clock on a Monday. I went something like 20% of the time of the year, and I scraped my exam. So the pass mark was 40%, and I got 42. So,
My psychology degree was BA, so I didn't have to do
okay.
I had to do stats, but not that many. As like if you have to do BSc. But I did a combined honours, so I did criminology as well. So I got out of
Oh, nice.
but the only thing about the criminology part was they hadn't, and I don't know if it's changed now. This is 10 years ago, so it was more than 10 years ago. But at that time, they hadn't got a full 3 year course for criminology. So for the first,
Oh,
we did a lot of sociology.
all right.
I have no idea what Karl Marx has got to do with criminology, but I know I did 3 months on him. It's like. So when you were doing your psychology degree, what was your plan at that point? Did you have a plan that when you were going to graduate, were you going to become a psychologist at this point? Is that what the plan was then?
Do you know what? I had no idea. Like, I, I don't know. Maybe kids these days have more of a clue, but I didn't know. I guess in the back of my head, I thought maybe, but because I was so lazy, I knew I wasn't going to get a 2-1, and you needed a 2-1 to go and do a master's in psychology. So as soon as I got my 2-2, I was a bit like, oh, now what? So I just went on the dole for 9 months. And yeah, it was brilliant. Nine months on the dole in Newcastle. And I enjoyed it, even though it's the most skint I've ever been in my life. There's a certain freedom to it. I think everybody should experience that at some point. But
Everyone,
um,
anyone's going to take anything from this, it'll be go on the dole for 9 months.
I just realised I sound a bit like that woman from the Common People song by Pulp, doesn't it? Yeah. Sorry, take that back.
My parents were on the dole for 30 years, and they seem to be having a great time. All the kids left, and they didn't get, like, all the child allowance and all that type of stuff. They've both gone. They both work now. My dad
Yeah.
literally started a job 2 years ago. He's 60. Well, he's 65 this year, and he started a job 2 years ago. And
God.
he loves it. He can't get enough of it. He absolutely adores it. He's like a handyman in a care home for people with brain injuries, and he adores it. He thinks it's great. I was like, you could have been doing this 40 years ago. I might have left Liverpool before I was 28 if you'd had. We could have gone on holiday. It is like, because I was on the dole at a point in my life as well, and it is like, and I was very young, and it is interesting because you are just trying to discover who you are and what you want to do. And
Yeah.
at that point, I have no idea. I didn't know until I was late on, and we might come to that with you. Is that it said? So I'll go on to the next bit. It said after graduating, it doesn't say she went on a dole for 9 months. It says she moved to London for 2 years.
Yeah.
Explain why, or anything like that, or what you did. So what happened?
Right. So what happens is after 9 months on the dole, I was so skinned. I just needed some money. So I thought I better apply for some jobs. So I just kind of applied willy-nilly, whatever I could find. So one job, I think I applied for a job working for BT in a call center in Newcastle. And then I applied for a job working for Bupa in London and a job working for a medical publisher also in London. Now, at that time, I had been dating this guy who I'd met in Newcastle, and he'd since moved back to Sussex. And I kind of thought that if I moved to London, then there would be more chance of our relationship working. So I went down to London. I did the Bupa interview and the medical publisher interview, and I did the interview in Newcastle as well for BT. And I actually got offered all three jobs because I'm quite jammy in interviews. Huh?
Did you hear that? No, you didn't
What
hear.
is it?
Did you hear that?
Cat.
That's my cat.
I didn't even know you had a cat.
Yeah. Sorry, it was so loud in my ear. I was like, I have to acknowledge it. Otherwise, I'm gonna look like an idiot. So go on. So you got all three jobs.
So I got offered all three, and I thought, right, I'm going to take medical publishing. Sounds more interesting than working for Bupa. So I took that one. I was staying with a friend at the time. I rang the boyfriend in Sussex to say, I've just accepted this job in London. We can be like much closer like now, and he dumped me. He dumped me on the day that I took the job in London.
I was just waiting because I knew that was coming. I just thought this, but I could just picture 22-year-old Callie. When they close to the love of my life. So you never saw him after moving down?
I know. No, well, I did see him again years later in Brighton. We happened to run into each other, and there's something that he said to me that I'd have to tell you privately. I couldn't air it, but it made me laugh and also gag. But anyway, so I took the job anyway, and a friend of mine from uni, Rob, happened to be looking for somewhere in London, and he found a 2-bed place in Tooting. So I lived in Tooting Broadway for 2.5 years, earning an absolute pittance. Like, I think my starting salary was 11,200, and my rent was like 720 a month plus the tube, whatever. And 2.5 years later, when I got made redundant, pretty much everybody got made redundant because the company was bought out. I was in something like £15,000 worth of debt. Wow. Because the only way to survive in London on that wage was to use my credit card to buy food, and then get loans to pay off my credit card, and then run up more credit cards. And but when I got made redundant, I was given, because we were part of the NUJ for some reason. I'm not a journalist, but we were part of that. They negotiated a good payoff. So I think I got something like £4,000, which was the most money I've ever had in my life. And because I'd been to Brighton to visit a mate from uni and fallen in love with it, I said to him, can I sleep on your floor for a bit while I get myself settled? And so my mate Rob from London drove me and all my stuff to Brighton, and I lived on a crash mat on my friend's living room floor for 6 weeks.
Yeah. So that's the next bit. Then spent there in Brighton, where she began to write.
Yeah.
So you've gone there. It's now what, you must be about 24.
Yeah.
So, what was you doing while you were living in Brighton? And did you get your own place? Did you get off the crash mat on the floor? And B, what was you writing at that time?
Yeah, so I was on Duncan's floor for about 6 weeks. And then I managed to get myself a job working as a, what do they call it, like a sales administrator for a computer company who were developing like a year 2000 bug fix thing. And all the stories I could tell of that company. There was once, it was a dress up at work for charity day, and the director, who was a keen member of his local S&M club, turned up in full chainmail and leather with a prostitute on a lead. And he gathered us all in the main office, and he just went, he looked around at all the costumes, and he went, I think I win.
You were in the office before the office came out.
Yes, exactly. Honestly, it was madness, absolute madness and mayhem, but bloody brilliant. And I met some great people I'm still friends with now. But yeah, so I found somewhere to live. A friend of mine knew some Welsh lads who were living in Brighton, and they had a spare room. So I moved in with them for a bit. And again, the messiness theme comes up because I wasn't very good at doing my own washing up. So they started putting my dirty plates in my food cupboard. So I'd come down to make my cereal in the morning and just be met by these piles of dirty dishes. I'm much tidier now. Don't let anybody tell you different. But yeah, the writing happened because what happened? Yeah, so I must have been, I'd probably been there about 4 years, maybe I was sort of late 20s something. And I'd seen this program on the BBC called Get Writing. And it was where a bunch of celebrity authors like Joanne Harris had started the short story. And the idea was for the members of the public to finish the short story, send it in, and then you'd get to go on the program and read yours out with the author or something like that. So I did the Joanne Harris one, which was quite surreal. And I really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. And although I didn't get anywhere in the show, it just gave me a bug for writing short stories. And so I just kind of started trying to enter these competitions that I found. There was a really good website called Get Writing, BBC Get Writing, I think. And they had like little PDF anthologies. And the first time one of my stories was chosen for one of those PDFs, I was over the moon. It was like my first acceptance. And then I found that I wasn't really getting much further. And I'd heard of this online short story boot camp run by this guy called Alex Keegan. And they were winning all of the competitions. And I thought, well, they must know something that I don't know. So I'll join this online group. And it was a baptism by fire. I mean, we did all of our marking of each other's work anonymously, but you always knew when Alex had marked your work. He didn't necessarily know it was yours, but he was brutal. I mean, he brought me to tears several times, some of the awful stuff. I mean, it completely, trained me up for Amazon 1-star reviews, because I'd heard far worse for the 2 years or whatever that I was part of boot camp. But it taught me absolutely loads. The way we used to score things, it'd have like points for opening, ending, character, theme, pace, language, like all of these different elements that had never occurred to me were necessarily parts of a short story. And I started doing better, and I started to win a few competitions and come runner up and all that sort of stuff. So it was worth the baptism by fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think those types of things are always great. So I was talking to someone last night about a writing group they're a part of, and they're trying to, and I said, like, I can imagine the invaluable of, like, like what they can give you, especially like to kind of prepare you for what comes after you publish. It says on here you worked as a graphic designer, a web developer, and an instructional designer. I know what the first two are. What's an instructional designer?
It's much more boring than it sounds.
I just thought you instruct people how to design. Is that?
No, it's boring. It's so in e-learning, the instructional designer is the person who designs the e-learning course. So the good thing about it was that it was better than being a web developer at an e-learning company, because that was really boring. So I switched to say, can I become an instructional designer? Because that involved writing. So
Ah,
you'd write the course, and often the courses would have a bit of a narrative, or they might have a character that kind of popped up on the pages to give you useful facts, or whatever it was. So to my mind, it was like, oh my God, finally I'm doing a job that's a little bit creative. And it was all right, as jobs go. It was all right. Again, I was with a really good team of people that I'm still friends with now, and I probably would have continued on longer if again I hadn't been made redundant and had to get another job, which was in London, and that was as a web designer again and instructional designer. I had to do both. And then I stayed in that job in London for 9 years, and I became like the manager of the team, and
wow.
that came with its own issues. But it was never what I set out to do. I mean, in a way, I kind of wangled my degree, saying that I knew about learning and memory, to get some of those jobs, and it was total bollocks, of course. But like I said, I'm really good in interview.
Now it goes on to say Taylor began writing short stories in 2005. We know that's bullshit. You were sending lady publishers books back. Oh, but it says in 2006 you won two short story competitions, the Helen Mullen Awards and the Bank Street Writers Competition, and were also runner-up in the Woman's Own short story competition. So this was like a real kind of, you were writing quite a lot of short stories at this point.
Yeah,
But your debut novel doesn't come for another 4 years.
yeah.
What was the gap? Why was the gap there?
It I think I was afraid. I think because it had been such a long dream, a childhood dream, I was really scared that if I tried and I failed, that would be worse than not trying at all. And I think that's something that a lot of people do. And I kept telling myself, yeah, I'm getting better and better at short stories, and I'm having more and more whatever. And it just felt daunting. Writing a 2,000 word short story for a competition is one thing, but writing a 80, 90, 100,000 word novel, is quite something else. And also there were no courses, like at that time there were no courses to go on to learn this. But what happened was, shortly after the Woman's Own, was it Woman's Own that I said?
Yes, Woman's Own.
Yeah. The Woman's Own story that was a runner-up, it was published in the magazine, and it was set in Malvern, where I went to boarding school, about a woman and a bench on the hills and whatever. And it was a bench that I used to go to with my friend when we used to skive church. We used to climb the Malvern hills, get a hot chocolate from the cafe, and sit on this bench and set the world to rights. And it turned up in my story. So I got in touch with this friend who I hadn't spoken to in years, and I sent her an email and I said, oh my God, I've just been runner up in this competition with this story. And I attached the story in the email. Anyway, this was probably on a Wednesday or a Thursday. On the Monday, I'm at work at the university in London, and I get a phone call to say that this friend that I'd sent it to had died over the weekend. She'd literally had a headache on Thursday night that got worse and worse and worse until she collapsed. She was taken to hospital. She had a brain aneurysm. They operated, and then she had a stroke, and then she had a worse stroke, and by Sunday she was dead. And that came out of nowhere. Like, there were no signs, no symptoms. She had two little girls. It was just awful. She was 33. I was 33. And that, for me, that was a massive wake-up call. That idea that literally from nowhere you can just lose your life. And it made me realize that I couldn't keep putting it off. Like, I couldn't stay scared, because I might not be alive next week or next year, or whatever. And so I'd had this idea for a while about this supernatural rom-com, and I just wrote it like a woman possessed. Over 3 months and 3 weeks, I wrote it after work. I stopped going out for 3 months. I wrote it at the weekends. And I just it was this. I don't know if this happens to other people who lose someone when you're youngish, but that fear that something will happen to you too. So I just wrote and wrote in case I died before I finished the book. And that was it. That was the first book, and sent it to Darley Anderson and a bunch of others. Darley Anderson liked the first 3 chapters, said he wanted it on an exclusive. Took about 6 weeks over Christmas to read it. Rang me. I got really excited because at that time you had to send your submissions in a brown paper envelope, and if they didn't like it, they'd send it back. But he rang me, and that's what people normally did if you were going to get an offer of representation from a literary agent. But he didn't. Instead, he told me all the things that were wrong with the book, in in a really blunt way. And he made me cry, but I tried very hard not to show that I was crying. And so I was kind of destitute at the end of this phone call. What kind of sadist rings people up just to tell them horrible stuff about their books? But he said that he wouldn't do that for everyone, and he only did it for me because he felt that there was potential in my book, and that I had to go away, read all the best-selling books in my genre, make my book less ponderous. And I looked that up, and it meant boring. And make the funny bits funnier. And I did. I mean, Assault for a bit first, and then I spent about 7 months. I bought the Sophie Kinsella, Can You Keep a Secret, which was a massive.
Fancy's Girl and stuff like that is like.
Yeah. She was like ruling the roost of romantic comedies, and I learned things from studying her book. His advice was actually brilliant, because I didn't know like the rule of 3 in comedy. I learned that from reading how she got laughs and working it out, that it was the third beat that made you laugh. And I learned about cliffhangers by reading her books. So yeah, it was brilliant advice, really. And when I sent it back, I had to wait quite a long time. And then Maddie, who is now my agent, she was Darley's foreign rights at the time. She rang me up because she'd been given it to read on a train journey, and said she'd fallen in love with it and wanted to represent me. So in a way, it was quite easy, which is probably not what aspiring authors want to hear. I did get 5 rejections from other agents, but
I think that's easy, but it's not. That's a year.
Yeah.
You're doing a year. That's a whole year before you get to the agent bit. It's like, and then it's about trying to get published on top of that as well. I mean, it's not an easy, because a lot of people would have taken that initial phone call and would have not put the work in to kind of get it to the point where they were going to take it on, because there are, and I know, because I did the same thing. Your ego can get in the way of certain opportunities.
Yeah.
And there are people who would have allowed their ego to kind of get in the way of, what do they know? That type of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Time to go and discover more about the genre that you were trying to write in. So the first novel was called Heaven Can Wait.
Yeah.
This is the funniest thing I've ever read in a Wikipedia article. And I'm really,
Oh no, I know what's coming.
You won the Pink Thong Award for Best Debut in the Chick Lit Club 2009 Awards. And we should also mention, was the first book ever to score 10 out of 10 in the club's rating system. Who else has won the Pink Thong Award? When you won, I have so many questions. What was the award? Was it a real set of pink? It was a real pink thong? Or...
Okay. First of all, I have to point out that Chick Lit Club was based in Australia. So the pink thong is the pink flip flop.
I'm so annoyed. You should not ruin my day.
Yeah, I didn't actually get anything. It was one of these sort of online-y blogs, when blogs were massive. I mean, I had a blog back then and stuff, and so they would just do these short lists of author of the year, funniest book of the year, saddest book, whatever, and they would just kind of award you something. But this Chick Lit Club was massive. Like at the time in sort of romantic comedy land, that was the biggest reviewing, most people looked at it sort of thing. So at the time it was a big deal. And and getting 10 out of 10, because their review system could be quite evil. So to get 10 out of 10 was, you know, at the time was massive. So yeah, I was chuffed about those.
Our second novel, Home for Christmas, was made into a film.
Mm.
People can now see it's on. Is it on Amazon? It's still on Amazon,
It's on Amazon Prime, yeah.
and it's got. I mean, it's listen. They didn't jump off the pages. People I knew exactly who they were, but I did recognize them as soon as I clicked on the IMDb pages. Lucy Griffiths, April Pearson, Carl Davis is the guy from Emmerdale, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So at this point, you're not writing crime. These are
Yeah.
natural, obviously, but did you have any inclination that this is that you weren't writing in the right genre, or was this just what you felt was what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Because the thing is when I was writing short stories, I was trying all kinds of genres. I was writing surreal stuff. I even had a go at sci-fi. I wrote some quite dark stories, and then I wrote like the lighter, fluffier, feel-good ones that would sell to women's magazines and stuff like that. So the darkness was already there, was always there. And actually, when I wrote Home for Christmas, which was an absolute nightmare of a book because of the number of edits that I got, one thing that my editor said was she was horrified by the backstory that I'd included for one of the characters, who was a guardian angel. But her backstory was that her child had died of cot death. And you can't laugh, but it was a romantic comedy. And I had a character who'd suffered that, you know. So fair dues to my editor for pointing out to me this is a bit dark.
Already seeing something emerging now, are we?
So yeah, so I think it was there. I think it was always waiting to come out. And then after those two books, my editor decided she didn't want any more rom-coms. And she got rid of me and a bunch of other authors. And I was kind of sort of left swinging, really. I wasn't sure what to do. I honestly thought it was my career over, 2 books and done. But I'd entered this competition for the Romantic Novelists Association. You had to write a chapter on a book with the theme keeping a secret. And I was pregnant with my son at the time. And it's the only time this has ever happened. So I don't know if it's some kind of pregnancy psychosis or what. But I was in the queue for Iceland, the supermarket, and I heard this character say the first lines, you know, coma, there's something innocuous about the word, soothing almost in the way it conjures up the image of a dreamless sleep. It literally jumped into my head, and I was just like, whoa. Went home with my shopping, waddling, wrote this down, and as much as the voice would sort of tell me, sort of thing. And I wrote the first chapter just off the top of my head like that. It was this woman called Susan. Her daughter had stepped in front of a bus deliberately. She'd found her diary entry saying, keeping the secret is killing me. And then at the end of the chapter, she kind of looks at her husband suspiciously or something. So it kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. I had absolutely no idea what was happening next, why any of this had happened, but I sent it to the competition. I thought it's never going to win because it's not romantic. Like, what's I even thinking? And it won. It won the Elizabeth Googe Trophy at the Romantic Novelists Association. And the woman, Annie, who was the chairwoman at the time, said, you have to write this. We're all dying to know what happens. And I was like, I haven't got a clue either. But, you know, I was out of contract. And there was something about it that really appealed. I've been listening to, like when I was pushing the pram with my son after he was born, S.J. Watson's Before I Go to Sleep. And I had read Elizabeth Haynes' Into the Darkest Corner. And it had never occurred to me that crime could be anything other than detectives, police, private eyes. So to find this, to sort of discover this new genre that was taking off, where it was ordinary people, ordinary women finding themselves in scary situations, I thought, I can write that. You know, I had shortly before escaped from a coercive and controlling relationship and then been stalked. And I thought, I can use what has happened to me to write this book. So the male character in it is coercive and controlling. And then the woman, the main character, worries that she's being stalked and that the guy's going to come back into her life and all this kind of stuff. And it just kind of poured out of me, and it kept me sane while my son was little because I was so sleep deprived, but writing made me feel like me. um and then, and there it was. And took a while to get a deal, got a lot of rejections. But then Avon, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, said yes,
Well,
and there it was.
that's interesting because I've always felt that romantic suspense and psychological thrillers, as they're called, what you say, are basically the same in a lot of ways. They're basically the same kind of genre. Is that you could possibly categorize them in each, and no one would notice the difference. It's just that maybe the psychological thrillers are a little bit darker in certain ways, but I think there are so many crossovers between romantic suspense and because it's all, I think it's all under the same umbrella. If you're holding your breath trying to get to the next bit to find out what happens, it's suspense that is, and if there's a lot of the romance parts of it are, you know, relationships that are breaking down or that are, as you're talking about, coercive control and stuff like that. That's very a hallmark of psychological thrillers.
But romantic suspense is about attraction between the characters, whereas psych thrillers, you've got your gaslighting husband, your stalker ex, your whatever. So they'll still have the thrills, but the men typically in psych thrillers are enemies rather than sidekicks, I'd say.
I'll take that. I still think there's a lot of crossover. So I remember, I'm going to tell you a story now. I remember back in, must have been the end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And Katie Loftus, who was an editor at Avon, sent me a book. And because she used to send me books all the time. She edited my second novel at Avon. My first editor had left at that point, Samir. And she sent me this book, and it was in the thing, and I remember reading The Accident. And I remember, and I tried before this because I wanted to put it up on screen, but I can't find it because don't get Yahoo email. It's the worst Yahoo.
I've got Yahoo email.
To the audience to know you've got it as well. It's the worst email provider. Trying to find stuff is just impossible. Yeah. I sent Katie an email after I read that book, and I said, "This is your big book for the year. This is gonna do big." And she was like, "Well, we hope yours is." And I was like, "No, don't worry about mine. This is the one. I think it's going to be absolutely huge." Oh. And I gave a quote. I don't know if it ever ended up on the book or anything like that, but I did give a quote for it and all that type of thing. But I never.
No, I never got a quote. I never got a quote.
I remember saying that. It was either to Katie or whoever the publicist was at the time. It was one of the two. I'd looked for both today to see if I could find it. But I remember reading it going, that's exactly what a debut crime novel, like a psychological thriller should be. It's like, you cannot put that down. Did you know, though, Avon, did you know at the time that it was gonna be the start of something, or did you feel like this was like, I'm just gonna throw it? Because I remember Avon at that time were kind of notorious for taking on a lot of authors. They would do a lot of supermarket sales, and then the authors would move on, and invariably have mixed results, having left.
Yeah.
Stayed with Avon for 10 years. You became the first. I think you were the first person who's got into Richard and Judy while with Avon. First hardback, possibly. I don't know. I don't know if you're the first hardback crime novelist with them.
Apart from their sort of Christmas, crime, first crime hardback,
So you've obviously got a lot of loyalty to them. But did you know at that beginning point that, did you have any inkling that this might be the start of something?
No, absolutely not. And if I'm honest, I don't think they did either. I think because I was rejected by so many editors, I mean, no offense to Avon, but I think their reputation is better now than it was maybe 10 years ago. But editors have like A lists and B lists, and ideally they want an editor in their A list. And if those editors all say no, then they go to their B list and whatever. And I think Avon was in Maddie's B list. And when they said yes, I was so worn down by so many no's that I was a bit, and I knew Avon were seen as being very, very commercial and very supermarket based. And and I wasn't, and I kind of at that point I was thinking, you know, when you don't want to be part of a club that lets you in, whatever that phrase is. I felt a bit like, oh, you know, sort of scraping the barrel sort of thing. Anyway, it was a really low advance. It was £10,000 for 2 books.
Exactly what I
Um,
got.
yeah, which I've heard since is completely typical. So, and I knew from having already had 2 rom-coms published, and you know, reading around the industry and knowing authors, that it's the books that get the massive advances that are going to get the massive marketing spend and all the PR. And as soon as I heard the advance was 10,000, I was like, I'm bottom of the pile. And that was reinforced when my proofs went out ring bound. Um, which is always a sign that not very much money is going to be spent on your campaign, which is basically just like printed bits of paper with, you know, a ring holding it together, and a printout of a potential cover, rather than the glossy, shiny, embossed.
Literally a setting on a printer you can do in the office where you just
Yeah.
bring back. It's just like, it's like when you get your dissertation done in like the uni lab.
Yes.
That's what I always felt it was like, you know. But
Yeah.
it,
And they're really hard to read because they kind of
yeah,
as you turn the pages, and I thought nobody's going to read this, nobody's going to take it seriously. And it was a surprise hit, I think, partly because Avon got on board with the ebook discounting quite quickly, and the accident was sold for 69p as an ebook. But it sold, like, altogether, ebook, paperback, audio, it sold over 250,000 copies.
it,
And no one could have been more surprised than me.
so it says on here, first psychological thriller, the accident sold over 150,000. So we need to correct that. They've understood. Reached number 3 in the UK Kindle chart. The Bookseller magazine named The Accident one of the top 10 best-selling debuts of 2014. I was one of the top 10 best-selling debuts of 2013.
Hey!
It shows you that Avon, despite the low advances,
Mm,
really did know how to sell books.
yeah, they did.
And that's the
Yeah.
thing, is that the Dead Gone, my debut, is still one of the biggest selling books that I've had out of it. Just is. They just knew how to sell books, and what that does is it gains you a readership instantly.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so the Lie then comes out, that came out a year later. That got to number 5 in the Sunday Times bestseller list. Remained in the top 20 for 5 weeks. Hit the number 1 spots on Kindle, Kobo, blah blah blah. You know, like, took the number 2 spot below The Girl on the Train and Google Books. That was also shortlisted for 2 Dead Good. So even by book 2, you're getting shortlisted for awards. At what point do you know that this is, oh, I can do this full time now?
So yeah, so I wrote the 2 rom-coms with a full-time job. I wrote The Accident on maternity leave. The Lie was a nightmare because I'd returned to work and I was looking after my son every Friday, because he was at nursery like Monday to Thursday. But between working and looking after my kid, there was hardly any time to write. And yeah, I would admit that often when I should have been doing the day job, I was actually writing my book. They can't fire me now because I'm left. But you know, if it got a bit quiet, I just write my book, because I was in London 1 day a week and then working from home 3 days a week. And it was at that point actually that I thought, if I carry on, I'm going to get fired. So you know, there's only so much that I can blag that I'm working hard. And it was because The Lie and The Accident had done much better than expected that I was offered a 3-book deal, and the money per book was less than I was earning in my day job. But you know, I spoke to Chris, my partner, and I was like, can we make this work? You know, I'll be earning something like £7,000 a year less or something. Can we make this work? And he was like, as long as you can still pay your share of the bills, then do it. So yeah, he's supportive like that. So I did, and I just thought, you know, it's gonna be potentially risky, because I'm leaving this great job with a good pension and really long holidays, and where I can not work very hard. And yeah, and it paid off. It paid off, and then the next deal was for 2 books, and was for more than my job. So
I'm going to take credit for the fact that you got more money in the second book deal, because they didn't offer me more money in the second book deal until we pushed. Then they offered more, but it still wasn't enough, and I still had to leave. But I think Avon at that time, and one of my favourite publishers, Avon, and I absolutely adored working with everyone who worked there. And I still see people who are from that time. I still see them at, like, Harrogate and things like that, and I always say hello and always say thank you. I think that there was like that feeling of, like, they didn't have the budget to kind of keep the writers, and I think that did change. So I am going to take credit for the fact that you're still there.
No, I think you can. No, I honestly think you can, because no, well, you're part of it, because you left, Miranda Dickinson left, Tony, no, was it
Neil White left.
Neil White left. There was a whole bunch of you that left, and you all told me that you were leaving because they wouldn't give you any more money. And I think they learned their lesson, that they'd lost this raft of talent because they couldn't pay them more. So that when it came to my agent negotiating, they were a bit like, are we going to just add to this mistake and get rid of another one, or give her a bit more money? I mean, realistically, given the number of sales that I've had, my 3-book deal was pretty small. But, I got royalties and all that stuff, so.
Always that kind of weird thing. I mean, like, the situation for me was very simple. Someone came along and offered me 10 times the money. I'm not going to be able to say, I'll stay here. I mean, yeah, Avon sold more of that, because that was when I moved during the Murphy and Rossi series. The next 2 Murphy and Rossi books did not sell as many as the first 2 Avon books did. It got better after that, but it still is that point of like, that's money in the bank, and you're like me. At that point, you are still going to be responsible for bringing money into the household, And for me, at that point, I was the only one who could do it, because Emma had just been made redundant. It was a financial decision, but I think it has paid off for you in a way, staying with Avon, because that loyalty, that kind of staying power with them, has given them ownership of you as an author, and has led to those moments where they're pushing for you to go into Richard and Judy. They're pushing for you to go into hardback, and all of those things happen because you stay with them, and you stay. Yeah. I think that's probably a really good decision that you made back then, because I think it does lead to those kind of things happening. So we're nearly 10 years on from that now, from the Avon debut. What do you see the future as holding? Are you still happy doing a book a year and things like that, or is anything changing for you?
I'm finding it increasingly hard to do a book a year. Having done 10 crime novels and psychological thrillers, you've got to come up with, as you know, a new plot every single time. And I put a list actually on my website of the different tropes in psych thrillers, and I've done almost all of them. I've done missing children, I've done stalkers, I've done someone from the past who you thought was dead coming back, I've done toxic friendships, I've done revenge, I've done, like, I can tick, I've done everything apart from twins, I think, like, I've done sisters, like, missing children, and it gets harder to come up with something that is different and innovative and that isn't being done by everybody else. And I know that you can't predict what's being done by everybody else, but I'd like to do something a bit different. And the last couple of books, the Guilty Couple, which is about a woman who is framed by her husband and comes out and tries to prove her innocence and get her revenge and stuff. And the one that I've just finished, that I've got to do the edits for, is about a bunch of people who were all stalking victims who decide to turn the tables on each other's stalkers. So I'm kind of going in a sort of revengey kind of direction now. But again, I'm not sure how far that I can push that, and whether it's a good idea or not. I'll have to wait and see how the paperback of The Guilty Couple does before I decide if it's a good idea or not. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can keep writing the same sort of psychological thrillers forever, one a year. I think there has to be some movement, but there's already quite a lot of movement from my first few books to what I'm writing now, because psych thrillers 10 years ago were really based around like psychological conditions and amnesia and drunkenness and dissociative amnesia and all that. And then they've kind of moved and shaped a bit into like locked room mysteries, which I did with Sleep. And now it's kind of this women taking control, revengey kind of. So I don't know, maybe it'll just evolve. Ideally, in a dream world, I would not want to write one a year, just because it's so relentless with all of the promotion and all of the other stuff and the editing and stuff as well. I'd like to write one every 2 years, but I'm the primary breadwinner in our family, so so it looks like I'll be writing one a year for the time to come. But I'd like to try and fit in writing a different kind of genre at some point. I mean, I've done that with my young adult, and it's really hard, particularly when you get the deal, because then the pressure is on to deliver and meet deadlines. But I've got something else that I want to write. I haven't got the plot. I've just got how it will feel. It's not crime. It's not crime. But I'm searching for the plot, and I ran it past my agent when I saw her the other day, and she went, "Oh yes, yes, write that as soon as you can." I was like, "I've got no time, and I haven't got a plot." So.
The Guilty Couple is out in paperback soon. It's about 5 weeks away, isn't it?
Yeah, 27th of April. So just over a month.
You must have had over a dozen books out now. Does it get any easier when the book is coming to release dates or anything like that? Do you have any? Does it?
No.
Nothing ever changes, does it?
No, I don't think I'm quite as excitable as I was with the earlier books. I think with the earlier books, I was full of hope, and is it going to be a word of mouth sensation? And then obviously you learn about how actually publishing works and marketing budgets, and you kind of know which books are going to be the word of mouth sensation. So, my expectations are at a certain level, and I just always I'm fearful that it'll fall below that and start disappointing people. But yeah, I would like it to get easier, but I think the only way to do that would be to just live on an island with no Wi-Fi and just pigeon post or something.
I mean, if anyone was going to do it, I think it would be you with the way you move around. But saying that, we've covered from early life to now, and you are much more settled now. You live in Bristol, and you kind of settled and everything like that. Do you look back on your childhood with any kind of feeling of I wish it wasn't like that, or is it do you appreciate what you had and how it's shaped you as an adult?
I think it's made me quite independent, and quite resilient, and I'm quite good at just making friends, not necessarily deep friendships, but just being friendly with people when I meet new people, because I guess I've had to, like, my whole life. The it's interesting that my son's just going to like the local comp, for use of a better word, when he goes to secondary school. And what I love is the relationship that I have with him, where he can tell me everything, and he does tell me everything. And there's that sort of closeness and bond between us. And having been to boarding school, that was not there with my parents. And there's still, I think, even though we've become closer over the years as they've got older, there's still a big gulf emotionally between us. And that's a shame. That's a shame that I don't have that kind of relationship that I have with my own child. So if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't go to boarding school. I wouldn't make that choice again. But you live and learn, and I've got some lovely friends from school, even if the actual experience itself was a bit variable.
I think it's apparent, and you're very self-aware in that sense, is that you've kind of done the opposite with your own son than what like that's always the key indicator. I think it's like people go, oh, my childhood was fine, and then you parent your own child completely different to the way that you were parented. It's like it can't have been, you can't have been okay with it, and that's the interesting thing. This is just, I mean, this is just psychological babble at this point though, because we both did. You start talking about anyway, let's not bore the audience. interesting that you've kind of been really you've been really intent on having those roots now. So
Yeah.
imagine that you don't have any plans of like, all of a sudden moving to Germany or anything now. But do you enjoy, I mean, like, do you enjoy going on holiday and things like that? Does that help, do you enjoy going or are you still really homely now? You kind of,
I do like going on holiday, but I am very homely. We went to Canada last year, which was something we'd wanted to do for years, and we'd planned to go in 2020, and then obviously that didn't happen. And I actually felt quite fearful beforehand because it just felt so far away. Like I've not really gone on many holidays that are outside Europe. And I felt weirdly fearful and like, oh, my little family is, come out of the nest and just out in the big world. But actually, it was a brilliant adventure, and we all loved it. And it made me think, oh my God, we need to do this more. My own fearfulness. I think in a lot of women as well, as you get older, as you approach 50, you become more fearful of a lot of things. And I need to not be fearful. I need to go back to that 18-year-old, 19-year-old who would just knock on the door of a house, take a room without meeting the inhabitants. I need to be that brave again. But I want us to go on adventures. It's something that I decided last year when we had such a good time. I was like, we need more adventures as a family, I think.
well, the obvious difference between being an 18-year-old who knocks on the door and does that, and now doing it now when you've got your family and that, you've got more to lose now. That's what it is psychologically, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
back then it's just you and you're not, you can be that kind of spontaneous. Now that's how I feel, is that like I
yeah.
can't do the same. Like I was an idiot when I was growing up and I would do stupid stuff all the time. And I'm the parent who's always saying, get down from there. It's like because they're fearful of like, of losing anything. And I think that's what it is, isn't it? It's just that fear. But I think you are so aware of these things. I think that, like, I can
Mm.
imagine, you won't be able to quiz with us one time because I'm going on a 4-week safari or something.
Let's hope so.
So I plugged the next book, which is The Guilty Couple. It comes out in paperback, but the book after that, when will that be coming out?
It hasn't got a title yet. I'm fairly certain my editor will want to change my working title. But that will be hardback and ebook and audio in March 24. So
That's nice. So
bit of time.
before you go, I asked questions of Mark as the first guest in this new environment, and I'm pretty certain these were the questions because I said I'm going to ask everyone the same question. I remember one of them. I can't remember if this was definitely the first one, so apologies if it wasn't. I think I asked what their favorite movie was and the favorite song is.
Oh, okay.
No, actually,
Okay.
it wasn't movie. It was book.
Okay.
I've just remembered because I've just remembered. So the favorite book and favorite song.
Oh, this is really hard. I wouldn't be able to choose favorite movie as well. It'd be a toss up between two. I am not the sort of person that rereads books. Because I've got so many books. Why am I going to read one over and over again if it made an impression on me the first time? Um, okay, I'm torn between the book that inspired me to be a writer because it was so magical, and the book that shaped me in a different way, like as a teenager. I'm gonna have to be totally honest, even though it's not very cool, and go with The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton.
You were going to say that. I was like, that's going to be the Magic Faraway Tree. I know it.
It's so good. I read it to my son like a few years ago, and I was fully. I mean, obviously, there's a bit of sexism and whatnot, but the actual adventures in the tree and the characters, reliving it by reading it to my son, it was as good as it was when I was a kid, and it's just magical. It feels real. It's a part of my brain that is real and magic. So yeah, it has to be that.
Favorite song?
Oh man, that just changes by the week, depending
That's
on
a good question.
depending on what mood I'm in. I mean, are we talking like a song that you could listen to on repeat and never grow sick of it, or?
Basically, yeah, I think that's the.
Oh God. And this is really hard. Like I love The Cure and I love reggae and I love Billie Holiday and
Well,
um
that's right there, isn't it?
I'm gonna go Summertime because it's just beautiful. I don't know who sung it originally, but you know,
Originally,
yeah. I'm
find
gonna go
out
Summer.
your time. Who sung "Summertime" originally?
Yeah, who sang I mean every artist sings it, but I prefer like Dina Washington and Billie Holiday and
Yeah,
Ella Fitzgerald.
I'm gonna find out right now. Maybe it was Billy, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I think it was a standard, though. I think it's been around much longer than
Yeah.
40s, 50s when she did it. I'm gonna find out now. Uh, that came up with the "In the Summertime" when the Okay, so it's an aria composed in 1934 by George for the 1935 opera Porgy and Bess.
Oh my God.
So it then became a popular and much recorded jazz standard. And yeah, that's what was Porgy and Bess about? This-
I didn't know that. I don't like musicals. I thought Porgy and Bess was a musical.
I think it is.
Yeah, but Summertime doesn't sound like a musical song. Hmm.
Interesting. We need to find that
Hmm.
now. If I can find it on YouTube, I'm going to put it in now.
All right.
Well, thank you. That's been. I could go on for longer, but that's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for.
It's been great. I feel like I've had a bit of a therapy session or I've been on This Is Your Life or something.
That's exactly what I like. It's a therapy session is a bit closer to what I should have been probably doing anyway after I left university.
I know what you mean.
But I know
Yeah.
it's just interesting to find out about our favourite writers, and that's what we've done today. So thank you very, very much for being a guest, our second guest on the new Two Crown Races and a Microphone, The Resurrection, as it should be called. But yeah, so go out and buy The Guilty Couple. It's out in April. And yes, thank you so much for sharing, and I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I loved it.